Now by Kate Gibson in London. Kate is the lead legal counsel for Paul Rusesabagina. Thank you very much for joining us here on the News Hour. Just start, if you would, talking us through the basis of the claim that's being made against the Rwandan government.
Thank you very much, Kim. It's been over 600 days now since Paul Rusesabagina was illegally kidnapped and rendered back to Rwanda to face trial in a proceedings that's sort of been universally condemned as being unfair. And this lawsuit is one in a series of legal complaints that have been brought against the Rwandan government that all have at their centre this sort of same idea that governments aren't allowed to do this. Governments aren't allowed to deal with political opponents or activists through kidnapping or illegally rendering or torturing people who say things that aren't favourable to the regime. Mm-hmm. And the Rwandan government knew that it didn't have a legal basis to have Paul extradited back to Rwanda, so they made a decision in August of 2020 to kidnap him. And this lawsuit is a way of saying that they weren't allowed to do this.
So is that the basis of the claim, because he was tricked, right? He thought he was going to Burundi, but obviously he wasn't. So is that the basis of the claim, or is it about the trial that he faced when he arrived there?
This lawsuit is all-encompassing, and it deals with all the violations of Paul's rights through from his kidnapping from San Antonio, Texas, through to what he faced when he was in Rwanda, which was physical torture and abuse as well as a sham trial. And this lawsuit has a really strong legal basis, essentially because the Rwandan government itself has admitted to this conduct. You know, on this network last February, the Rwandan Attorney General, Johnson Businye, admitted that the Rwandan government did this, that it paid for the plane that was used in the kidnapping. And in the United States, sovereign countries like Rwanda aren't immune from suit when they engage in acts like torture and kidnapping. But importantly, there's really no dispute as to what went on here. Last month, the United Nations Working Group on Arbitrary Detention came out with an opinion that said that Paul's kidnapping was illegal, he's being arbitrarily detained, he should be immediately released, and the United Nations Special Rapporteur for Torture should look into the conditions of his detention and what happened to him in Rwanda. In relation to the trial itself, independent, impartial trial monitors from the American Bar Association, from the Clooney Foundation for Justice, monitored the trial where Paul was charged with terrorism in Kigali and have issued a report saying that the trial was manifestly unfair and the conviction shouldn't stand. So, you know, this lawsuit is a legitimate legal complaint that encompasses all the violations of his rights. And we hope that it will stand for the principle that regimes that engage in transnational repression shouldn't be allowed to do so. But more particularly for Paul, there are real-life consequences of what happened to him because he's ill. He's 67 years old. He suffers from a heart condition. He's been actively deprived of the medication that he needs to monitor that heart condition, and he's suffered a series of strokes over the last few weeks. So humanitarian groups, NGOs, governments around the world are calling for his release. Mm-hmm. And we hope that this lawsuit will provide another basis on which they can continue to do that.
As his lead legal counsel, have you spoken to him? Have you seen him?
It's a really difficult situation, Kim, because he's only allowed to have 5 minutes on the phone on a Friday afternoon at 2:30. So contact with him is extremely limited, even for the family. We have 2 wonderful lawyers in Kigali who are still able to access Paul and speak to him about the various legal measures that we're taking on his behalf. but the restrictions are so great that they aren't allowed to give him any documents. He's not allowed to read any documents or sign any documents. So we face a lot of obstacles that have been put in place deliberately to make it hard for us to pull legal levers outside of Rwanda. But this case is really important and stands for so much that we will continue to do so despite the obstacles in place.
All right. Hey, thank you very much for that, Kate Gibson there for us in London.
Thank you very much, Kim.